At 81, her body weakened by strokes and cancer, but her spirit unbroken, Bette Davis finally spoke the words she had swallowed for half a century. Her feud with Joan Crawford had become Hollywood legend. But the ugliness she revealed, the betrayals, the cruelty, the cold fury that still burned in her eyes, left people stunned. Even in her twilight years, she refused to let her truth die unspoken. Picture a young woman on the cusp of greatness. Bette Davis had clawed her way out of obscurity through sheer will, a woman who refused to be anyone's ornament. She endured directors who told her she wasn't pretty enough, fought studio executives who tried to typecast her in vapid roles, and finally landed a lead in a film she hoped would mark her arrival. Warner Brothers was set to release X-Lady in April 1933, promising her first major publicity push. The night before the campaign launched, she went to sleep thrilled at the thought of seeing her face in the papers the next morning. But when she opened the papers, there was nothing about her. Every headline screamed instead about Joan Crawford filing for divorce from Douglas Fairbanks, Jr. Crawford's personal life had stolen the spotlight. To Bette, it felt deliberate, a calculated insult. Crawford, already a glamorous darling at MGM, knew how to work the press like a politician. Bette, a stage-trained actress who valued craft over cosmetics, learned an ugly truth that morning. In Hollywood, image trumped artistry. What should have been her first moment in the sun was buried beneath gossip about a woman she barely knew. The sting never faded. Betty could have dismissed it as bad timing, but she believed it was intentional. She told friends she suspected Crawford had timed the announcement to overshadow X-Lady. From that day on, she watched her rival warily. Both women were ambitious and fiercely independent in a man's world, but while one was celebrated for beauty, the other was mocked for bluntness. What began as a stolen headline festered into resentment, and the next betrayal cut even deeper. In 1935, while filming Dangerous at RKO, Bette worked with the handsome, intelligent actor Franchot Tone. He was kind to her, and she fell hard. She confided in friends that she could imagine a future with him, but she didn't know Joan Crawford had already set her sights on him. Crawford invited Tone to her home, hosted lavish dinners, and used her charm to win him over. Before long, he had fallen for her. They married in October 1935, just days after Bette had publicly declared her feelings for him. The humiliation was devastating. To Bette, Crawford had stolen not only her man, but also her dignity, just as she had once stolen her headlines. The following year, Bette received her first Academy Award nomination for Dangerous. But Warner Brothers, still angry that she had defied the studio, refused to fund her gown for the ceremony. Defiant, she chose a plain, shapeless dress out of protest. When she won the Oscar, she looked almost dowdy beside Joan Crawford, who appeared in diamonds and satin, radiant and smug. Crawford glided up to her, kissed Franchot Tone on the cheek, and said sweetly, "Dear Bette, what a lovely frock." The press had a field day with the contrast. Crawford, the glamorous star, Davis, the frumpy rebel. What should have been Bette's triumphant night became another public embarrassment. Bette never forgot the humiliation. She later called Crawford's comment one of the cruelest things ever said to her. Deep down, she believed Crawford's marriage to Tone had never been about love. It was about winning. Whether that was true or not, the belief fueled her bitterness, and as both women's careers soared, their rivalry hardened into open hostility. Then, in 1943, Crawford's luck faltered. After decades at MGM, her contract was terminated, and she shocked Hollywood by signing with Warner Brothers, Bette's studio. Executives thought housing both stars under one roof would be profitable. Crawford reached out with gifts, flowers, and friendly letters, hoping to mend fences. But Bette saw only manipulation. She returned every offering with a curt note, later joking that Crawford's gestures felt more like seduction than friendship. From then on, their relationship remained icy. In public, they were civil, but in private, their war continued. Now, it wasn't just personal, it was professional. Warner Brothers began developing strong female roles, and both women wanted them. Bette had built her reputation on tough, unglamorous characters, while Crawford still embodied the shimmering movie star. Their rivalry had become legendary, and neither would yield an inch. Crawford and Davis were complicated women who didn't need to be liked. Crawford, long labeled by gossip columnists as the embodiment of glamour, was desperate to reinvent herself. She fought relentlessly for the title role in Mildred Pierce. Bette Davis had been considered for it, but studio executives, weary of her defiance, gave the part to Crawford instead. The result was Crawford's triumphant comeback, an Academy Award for Best Actress in 1946. To Bette, it felt like salt in an open wound. She believed the role was hers by right, yet her rival had taken it. The bitterness seeped into her work. In 1952's The Star, Davis played an aging, alcoholic actress sleeping on a couch in her agent's office, a portrayal widely interpreted as a cruel parody of Crawford's fading career. Bette never denied it. "Mrs. Crawford is a movie star," she said once. "I am an actress." That single line captured how she saw the divide between them. One posed for cameras and banquets. The other lived inside her characters. Davis publicly accused Crawford of sleeping her way to the top and once quipped that she had been with every male star at MGM, except Lassie. The remarks were biting and funny, but beneath them lay years of resentment. In an industry that pitted women against each other for the few meaningful roles available, their rivalry was not only personal, but systemic, a product of Hollywood itself. By 1961, both women's stars had dimmed. Younger actresses now ruled Hollywood, and Crawford, seeking a comeback, found a script called Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, about two aging sisters trapped in a decaying mansion. Sensing its potential, she brought it to director Robert Aldrich. On one condition, Bette Davis had to play the monstrous Baby Jane Hudson. Crawford likely hoped that pairing herself with her fiercest rival would create irresistible publicity. Davis agreed, but only if she got the role of Jane, leaving Crawford to play the paralyzed sister, Blanche. She also insisted there be no romantic involvement between Crawford and the director. What seemed like a professional arrangement quickly became war. From the first table read, Davis made her disdain clear. She showed up with a Coca-Cola bottle in hand, smirking. She knew Crawford was a Pepsi board member after her husband's death, and to needle her, Davis had a Coca-Cola vending machine installed on set. Crew members laughed quietly, while Crawford retaliated by handing out free Pepsi to the grips and electricians and knitting during Bette's scenes. Both women competed for the crew's loyalty with gifts, flattery, and late-night calls to the director, each accusing the other of unprofessional behavior. Their feud turned physical. In one scene where Baby Jane beats Blanche, Davis struck Crawford so hard she needed stitches. Davis claimed it was an accident. Crawford got her revenge during another scene, where Jane had to drag Blanche across the floor. She secretly strapped weights under her costume, forcing Davis to pull harder until she strained her back and collapsed in pain, cursing loud enough for the whole soundstage to hear. The crew whispered that they were watching decades of animosity erupt into violence. Despite it all, both delivered astonishing performances. Davis's Baby Jane was grotesque and unhinged, Crawford's Blanche tragic and vulnerable. The film became a massive success, reviving their careers, but the truce lasted only on screen. When award season came, their feud reached its cruelest point. Davis was nominated for Best Actress. Crawford was not. For Bette, the nomination was vindication, a long-awaited acknowledgement of her craft. She imagined walking onto that stage to accept the Oscar she believed she had earned. Crawford, however, had other plans. Quietly, she contacted the nominated actresses who couldn't attend, including Anne Bancroft for The Miracle Worker, and offered to accept their awards on their behalf if they won. It was a cunning move disguised as generosity. On Oscar night, Davis sat poised in a sleek gown, speech-ready, her hair perfectly styled. When the envelope was opened and Anne Bancroft's name was announced, cameras caught Crawford gliding down the aisle in shimmering silver, sweeping past Davis to accept the award on Bancroft's behalf. The audience gasped. Photographers captured Davis's frozen face as Crawford cradled the Oscar like her own. The woman who had once stolen her headlines, her lover, and her dignity had now stolen her moment of triumph. Later, Davis confessed to friends that watching Crawford take the stage made her feel physically ill. Later, Davis confessed to friends that watching Crawford take the stage made her feel physically ill. The humiliation burned deep, not just because she'd lost, but because, once again, Joan Crawford had found a way to turn her defeat into spectacle. It confirmed what Bette Davis had long believed, that Joan Crawford would stop at nothing to outdo her. After the Oscars, whatever thread of civility remained between them snapped. Bette publicly accused Crawford of sabotage and privately dismissed her as a phony, a phrase that lingered in Hollywood gossip for years. Crawford, in turn, insisted she had only been helping absent nominees, but the damage was permanent. The image of her sweeping onto the stage to accept Anne Bancroft's Oscar became immortalized in Hollywood lore. It wasn't their last betrayal, but it was the most spectacular. Still, the movie industry, ever eager to capitalize on scandal, wondered if their animosity could be turned into profit once again. Producers imagined the two women reunited, their real-life feud driving ticket sales. What they didn't anticipate was the exhaustion that had settled into both of them. The years of anger, bitterness, and rivalry had taken their toll. In 1964, director Robert Aldrich, who had helmed Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, set out to capture that same dark magic with Hush. Hush, Sweet Charlotte, a Southern Gothic thriller centered on two aging women haunted by secrets and violence. He wanted Bette Davis and Joan Crawford to star together again. Both agreed at first. They were promised generous salaries and the chance to reclaim some of their old glory. For a brief moment, it looked as if their animosity might finally be tamed by professionalism. That illusion didn't last. During the first week of filming, tensions flared. Bette, now also serving as a producer, had power she'd never wielded before, and she used it. Crew members whispered that she gave Crawford unreasonable call times, rewrote scenes without warning, and undermined her in interviews. Crawford fought back by claiming illness. She checked herself into the hospital, citing pneumonia and exhaustion, and refused to return until Bette apologized. Bette refused. Production came to a standstill, insurance companies threatened to pull funding, and Aldrich, desperate to save the movie, replaced Crawford with Olivia de Havilland. Crawford's departure ended any remaining possibility of reconciliation. The feud that had simmered for 3 decades finally burned itself out in bitterness. When asked about Crawford's exit, Bette quipped, "At least I won't have to drag that across a floor again." Crawford, ever the professional in public, said little but privately swore never to speak to Davis again. Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte went on to be a critical and commercial success, even earning Oscar nominations. But the behind-the-scenes drama overshadowed the film itself. What could have been a redemptive reunion became just another casualty of their war. By then, both women were fading from Hollywood's center stage. Younger actresses were taking the roles that once would have been theirs, and studios that had once courted them now regarded them as relics from another era. Yet the legend of their feud only grew. Journalists kept bringing it up in interviews. Tabloids milked every insult for headlines. Fans debated who had won. The truth was far more complicated. Both women were wounded, both were weary, and both were still fighting for relevance in an industry that had long since moved on. Their rivalry, once their greatest publicity engine, had become a prison neither could escape. In May 1977, during an interview, Bette Davis was asked if she would ever make peace with Joan Crawford. She laughed and said, "Why should I?" She never apologized. The following year, when told that Crawford had died, she reportedly replied, "You should never say bad things about the dead. You should only say good. Joan Crawford is dead. Good." The line shot through newspapers and talk shows like wildfire, cementing her reputation as Hollywood's last great truth-teller or its last great villain, depending on whom you asked. But beneath the acid humor, there were flashes of something softer. When Crawford's daughter Christina published Mommy Dearest in 1978, accusing her mother of cruelty and abuse, Bette defended Joan publicly. Despite everything, she refused to join the chorus tearing down a woman who could no longer fight back. It was a rare moment of grace, proof that even after decades of rivalry, hurt, and pride, Bette Davis could still see the humanity in the woman she had spent a lifetime hating. She said that while they had been enemies, She respected Joan's talent and found it detestable for a child to publish such accusations. She even hinted that any mother could be driven to the brink by the pressures Joan had endured. In that comment, there was a trace of empathy, perhaps an acknowledgement that both women had been portrayed as monsters and had seen their private lives weaponized by the industry and the press. Bette also gave Crawford credit where it was due. In a 1987 appearance on The Today Show, she told Bryant Gumbel that Crawford had always been punctual and prepared during the filming of Baby Jane. They had never been friends, she admitted, but she acknowledged that Joan knew her lines and gave a fine performance. Coming from Bette Davis, that sounded almost like praise. She could despise the person and still respect the work. As time passed, she began to understand that trading insults had kept their names alive, even as it drained her. By the late 1980s, Bette Davis had survived a stroke and a mastectomy. She walked with a cane, her once powerful voice now gravelly, but her eyes still burned with the same fierce light. Turning 81 in April 1989, she appeared on talk shows like David Letterman and Larry King Live. Knowing her time was short, she spoke less of rivalry and more of regret. She talked about how lonely it had been to be constantly compared to another woman in a man's world. The feud, she admitted, had consumed her. "It hurt," she said simply. "It cost me relationships." She confessed that she had pushed Crawford away because she feared losing roles, that she had cried after the Oscars out of humiliation, and that when she dragged Crawford across the floor in Baby Jane, she had wondered whether any of it was worth it. During the aborted Hush, Sweet Charlotte. Shoot, she had even hoped for a truce, but she hadn't known how to begin. By then, she sighed, it was easier to hate. These revelations shocked audiences because they were raw, stripped of the wit and venom that had defined her public persona. What made them powerful was their honesty. Bette finally acknowledged her own jealousy and cruelty, admitting that both women had been trapped by a system that thrived on competition between female stars. She wondered aloud if things might have been different if there had been more roles for women, or less gossip. When asked if she forgave Joan, she paused for a long time before whispering, "I don't know." Not long after those interviews, on October 6, 1989, Bette Davis died. She left behind a legacy of fearless performances and a feud that had captivated Hollywood for half a century. Her final words about Joan Crawford weren't insults, but reflections, admissions of pain, regret, and complicity. They didn't erase the cruelty of some of her past remarks or the bitterness that had defined so much of their history, but they revealed the woman behind the legend. Vulnerable, wounded, human. Hollywood has always loved a good rivalry. It sells tickets, headlines, and myths. But beneath the gossip and the glamour are people, flawed, ambitious, and breakable. Bette Davis and Joan Crawford were products of a system that elevated them while pitting them against each other. Their feud was ugly, full of jealousy and vengeance, but it also laid bare the cost of survival in a world that demanded perfection. When Bette finally spoke at 81, she didn't seek to justify herself or condemn her rival. She simply told the truth. And in doing so, she reminded the world that legends may glitter, but they also bleed, they bruise, they regret. Sometimes the ugliest stories are the ones that tell us the most about what it means to be human.